everybody. Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff, we are once again dealing with a topical issue, a timely issue that
Well, every time we think an issue is decided, suddenly, well, and I guess this is not untrue in any era that something, although most recently it's very pointed, what we thought has been settled is suddenly up for discussion again. It
yes,
has to be debated politically and in front of the courts.
there's a legal term, stare decisis,
Yeah,
meaning established law, right?
right.
And it's pissing me off that the at their confirmation hearings for the Supreme Court, all of the most recently appointed
Hmm.
justices, um, who many of them said they absolutely believed in stare decisis, things that were settled law, and then as soon as they got on the court, they fucked it up intentionally.
Oh, yes. Yeah. That's the thing, that it's
Yes,
the Congress was lied to
yes,
by at
and
least
this
three of the last four judges.
yes. So, and this is all by way of saying what we're going to talk about is is um, something that's come up several times in the news and is the result of um, the recent decision by the Supreme Court in creative, was it creative 303
Well,
31?
yeah, in a fictitious
Yes,
suit brought by a pawn, an agent of conservative
yes. A,
politics.
a web designer with no clients said, claimed to have a client who was a same-sex couple who wanted to get married and wanted this designer to create a wedding site for them. Uh,
And particularly in that suit to write their copy,
yes,
which is
and
which was where the which is where the what the legal decision turns on.
but the name and phone number of the person who was eventually contacted after the decision by journalists said, I've been married to a woman for 15 years. I am, I never contacted this person. I don't need a website. So the suit was completely hypothetical
Yeah,
and
fabricated. I like the term fabricated.
fabricated. Yes.
Yeah,
And rather than have an actual case to bring before the court,
which there have to be a backlog.
yes, they are not even this side of this rights limiting the movement to limit people's rights and call it freedom, is they're making shit up. They aren't even waiting for real
Right,
cases.
right.
So what we're talking about today, in terms of, as always, in terms of the virtues and ethics, particularly now, is why this is bullshit, essentially. that and so so before we launch into this,
Yes, I think
I
we need to fortify ourselves.
we absolutely do. And what are you fortifying yourself with tonight?
I am fortifying myself once again with I think what I had in my with our last recording session, and it is the Horse Soldier Barrel Strength Bourbon Whiskey, cut with a little bit of Fever Tree ginger ale or ginger beer. I don't remember which one.
Nice. That sounds good.
Yeah, I really like it, but at 122 proof, it needs a little bit of cutting.
Yeah, I would think.
And you, sir,
Oh, I have
the nearly invisible.
invisible glass. I have a glass of Vouvray from Loire Valley.
Wow,
It
say that
is
fast.
no, I could barely say it slowly.
Before you had a glass of wine, you could barely say
Yes,
it.
it is. It's I really like it. It's um perfect. I think it was a perfect summer wine.
Hmm.
Really nice. So here's to you.
So, so this popped up recently in Michigan. This kind of case has come up again recently, and is what prompted me to suggest it to you as a topic tonight. There's a company in northern Michigan who has refused service. Now, this it goes beyond just whether or not they have a right to do it. They're really being assholes about it.
Yes.
A hairstylist, Studio 8 Hair Lab, has refused service to a trans person and referred them to a pet groomer. And that's for whatever you think your rights are in this situation, that is demeaning and assholery. That's all that
Yes.
is.
It's the opposite of courtesy.
Yes.
It is cruel. It's rude.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very bad behavior. I contend, though, that and the state has laws against discrimination of what are known as protected classes of people. And these are
Right.
determined both by state law, and there's federal law that covers it, and there's quite a number of federal laws. And the categories are are what I think of as innate or immutable qualities that people have that
Yes.
are protected from discrimination.
Yes.
So for example, age, you cannot change your age. You weren't born at this age. I was actually born at a very young age. I was born at a
Okay.
very
Yeah. Right.
young
But I'm
age.
bummed.
But
Thanks,
I'm bummed.
Groucho.
Yeah, you're welcome. But but you cannot change your age. So age is people are supposed to be protected from age discrimination. As we well know, ageism is a thing in a lot of industries. They
Yeah.
get away with it. Disabilities, people are protected. People with disabilities, you can't change that you have a disability. Sexual orientation or gender identity are also protected. Your status as a parent, your religion. Now, it might be argued that people could change their religion, but they should not be required to get service, right? National origin, you can't change that. Pregnancy, you can't change if you're pregnant. You're right.
Right.
Um, um, so, and people also are legally supposed to be protected from discrimination as an act of reprisal against like whistleblowers or something.
Yes.
So there are protected categories of people. The thing that's not protected from consequences is like I'll back up. The First Amendment guarantees the right to free speech. But that only means that the government cannot censor your speech.
Yes.
It
Correct.
does not mean you're free from the consequences of your speech.
True.
Your attitudes, your speech, your political affiliations, these are things you can change. You are so I or any business should not be able to discriminate against a person based on their race or religion or gender or sexual identity, but they don't have
Well,
to serve a Nazi.
true. Now, but I want to go back a minute
Yeah,
and play in some ways devil's advocate, because I think this is where the meat of all this discussion has to end up. In this case, like you said, you can't discriminate against someone because of something they can't change.
right.
Gender identity is protected, but but you can choose to change your gender identity.
Well, to be clear, someone's gender identity is who they are, even if the outward expression, as in the sex assigned at birth, doesn't match. Their gender identity, their expression, we have to be clear about the difference between.
But here's the and
So
I hate
people
to be
aren't
making
changing it on a whim. In other words, if somebody, and this pisses me off when say somebody not understanding this tries to minimize it or mock it by saying, "Oh, I identify as a toaster." Yeah, fuck you. This is a serious thing. When somebody says they know who they are, they mean it, and so they're not changing it because they can change it. They are changing to who they really are, not changing to something else who they are not.
accept that there's no way to determine that beyond the word of the individual saying so. My point is only that if the law is going to protect a class, is going to say that you can't discriminate against someone based on their sex, but someone can just declare what their sex actually is, I'm not sure how that law can stand.
You are, yeah. So we have to, that's not how it works. That's not, that's not what people do, except when they're,
But you can't write a law and say, well, nobody would do that.
no, but
You can't write a law based on
no,
that.
no, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. Um, the,
Now, to be clear, I don't think I am not trying to say that this state, this condition, I want to say like it's a disease, but if you are transitioning, if you decide that you need to physically transition from one sex to another, that is totally up to you, and I don't care.
that's, that's gender identity.
Okay. So, well,
Sexuality,
what are we talking about? Nobody, this person isn't in our example that we're using here, isn't being discriminated against because they're homosexual. God knows a hairstylist discriminating against homosexuals, but
no, but their gender identity.
the fact that they are trans,
Yes.
they are transitioning,
Or have transitioned.
or have whatever. So, and you're right, it is an ideological difference, or that they are discriminating against because of their ideology. They are discriminating against someone.
The company in this case said, you're either a man or a woman. And if you think you're something else, then I'm not doing you go to a dog groomer.
Pet groomer, yeah.
But they are factually incorrect, because they are saying that gender is binary, and it's not. It's what's known as a bimodal distribution. That is, there are bimodal distributions. So there are two peaks in this, like two bell curves, two bell curves, the peaks of which are male and female, but there's intersex, and there's all kinds of variations, because it's not simply chromosomal, it's not XX and XY. There are all kinds of variations on that. There's hormone sensitivities, there's different kinds of there's so many different factors that determine both the physical attributes of sexual characteristics and the internal self-identification, the essentially feeling that somebody has. So if somebody says this is who they are, essentially it's none of your fucking business as a business to say, oh, I'm not going to help you. If
Well, and I agree, and I agree with that. That's my,
you know,
I
so
absolutely think that's the case. But at the same time,
it's not a choice. You said it was it
well,
somebody could
deciding to
choose.
physically, now I maybe I haven't, the article doesn't say, deciding to physically transition is a choice. You have to decide that. You have to enter into it
You have to, but
consciously.
you have to enter into it is with psychological screening, medical evaluations. It's a process. You choose to enter into the process, but you are not choosing to change who you are um, just because, just on a whim. It's changing into who somebody really is, and they're doing so with there are lots of procedures for it. So
But
it's not.
is there a point at which a a doctor or a psychologist or an expert can say, no, no, you can't. No, you're not really, this is not an appropriate surgery for you. Does that exist?
Oh yeah, somebody has to. Yeah, there has to be. There's psychological screening that goes on as well as medical evaluation. So the point is, though, it doesn't. This is beside the point. I don't.
That is my point.
Yes, I don't need to see what's underneath someone's clothing or inside their head to determine whether to serve them for something like this. But if somebody comes in with a swastika tattoo on their fucking forehead, they've chosen to do that. They can choose to have it removed. If
Well,
they,
so, but if
this is
someone,
not the same thing.
it isn't, you are correct. And I'm not, again, I'm not arguing that, that they're right, or that what they're doing is right or even legal in this state. But we differentiate, we have decided that these things are hateful, and therefore it's okay to discriminate against,
No,
right?
they have decided this.
Well, somebody, no, as a society, well, you're saying, I got, if someone came in with a swastika, your ideology says you can refuse to serve them.
But I'm not discriminating, because discrimination in the
However,
term
now,
we're talking about it here does not mean, is not the definition. It means discriminate as in make a choice between this and that. That's what I am doing. I'm not discriminating in terms of I have a prejudice against this person because of their innate characteristics.
okay, okay, but if someone, say this, the person walking into your business isn't declaring themselves as a transitioning person, but simply is wearing a rainbow flag with a pink triangle and wearing sort of the opposite symbology. There, can a business owner then say, "I won't serve you"?
Because of the outward.
That was a choice. They put that patch on their sleeve just like the swastika, and I disagree with your ideology. I'm going to refuse to serve you.
That's an interesting question, but that's not
See,
what they did.
no, I know, but we're talking about, this is a more
Right,
meta question.
right.
But because I believe
Because
that they,
that would be refusing to serve somebody because of their speech,
yes,
because they could be an ally. They wouldn't necessarily have to
right,
be a member of
exactly,
that class. It could be. That's a
right.
really interesting question you posed.
it's a pretty basic question. I mean, unfortunately, it's the question the right uses all the time to argue against calling hate speech free speech. They want hate speech to be protected under the First Amendment as free speech. We
Well,
have, as the government has determined that there is such a thing as hate speech, which is not protected.
yes, because it's incitement, essentially. It's related to incitement speech.
It's related to,
The
but
old term fighting words, essentially.
yeah, which is still law and still on books
Yeah.
in some
And
states.
provocation. So people
Right.
who engage in hate speech have been convicted of provoking provoking violence.
Certainly, but you can't say that other less conservative movements haven't also incited violence.
I'm not saying that. But hate speech is defined as speech against a protected class of people.
The protected class is kind of the you know
Right.
what I think what I'm getting to here now, even as I'm discussing this, is that someone a pride parade
Mm-hmm.
isn't the same as a Nazi march, because a Nazi march is against is against something. Our ideology says these classes of people need to be eradicated.
Right.
But a pride speech is not we want to eradicate them. It's we just want to be allowed to not be eradicated.
Right.
There's
So
I think maybe that's the difference.
yes, I agree. And I have explained before, people who say, well, why isn't there a straight pride or a white pride said because pride in this sense is the absence of shame.
Yeah.
And but that's not as catchy to call it an absence of shame event, right?
A
It
guilt-free event.
means people who what's that?
A guilt-free event.
Guilt-free event. People who have been told, and culture and society has said, this person that you are should be ashamed of that. And pride is saying, no, we need not be ashamed of this. It's the opposite of that. And so people who have never been told to be ashamed of who they are don't need a pride
Right.
event because they're right.
Right.
So, so I think that is the difference. That again, the hate speech is against protected categories of people with innate or immutable qualities, and hate speech is essentially about violence towards those people, whereas the rainbow flag is about the police don't eradicate us, right?
Yeah, it's an acceptance rather than a
right.
Yeah. Okay. So
Thank you. That defines the difference. Yeah.
And I only really in our discussion, because I've questioned myself with this numerous times, and I've thought, and still there's a part of me that still says a small business owner now, and I define a small business as one that is not publicly traded and gets no government subsidy.
Yeah.
Should be able to refuse service to anyone they want. But I think there ought to be a list. I think there ought to be, the paper should say this company has refused service to these people. Now, and that's I think I've only come to that because I think we've made a certain amount of progress, and I think a large segment of society now would say, well, I'm not going to do business with them either.
Well, and that has been the case there are companies that I won't patronize.
Oh, sure.
I don't give a damn how good people say their fucking chicken sandwiches. I'm not gonna eat there.
Right. Well, or like Hobby Lobby or someplace like that,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
I'll buy
I
my shitty craft supplies somewhere else.
right. So, but it, I also see the danger of that being allowed. The danger of allowing a company to simply say, I'm not going to serve you because I don't like the way you live.
I absolutely agree that's dangerous.
Yeah.
It is
So
dangerous.
while
Yeah.
part of me says that in a free country, as an owner of a business, I ought to be able to refuse you service because I don't like you. I don't like your looks. I don't like your whatever. It, but
But it's not the freedom that you're thinking about, it's the social contract. A business operates within the social contract. But in the same way that we said, courtesy is, or rather tolerance, um, Popper's tolerance paradox. If the
mhm,
tolerant are tolerant of intolerance, the intolerance will take over, and
yes,
right.
exactly. That's
So, but the solution to that, the solution to Popper's intolerance paradox, is that tolerance is part of the social contract,
yes,
that you agree in our society to tolerate if you can't celebrate different cultures. You agree to tolerate them, and if you are not tolerating them, you have violated the social contract, and you therefore don't deserve the protections of the social contract. So I'd say the same is true. So you don't deserve courtesy and respect and that sort of thing. I would say the same is true for a business. A business operates within the social contract. The society provides law and
right.
police and contracts and all the things, an economic system and banking laws and all the things that are necessary for a business to succeed.
Right. To survive.
So to survive and succeed, and a business is part of that social fabric and must observe the social contract. Offering service to not denying service to protected classes of people, or rather denying service to protected classes of people, violates the social contract. Whether or not it violates the law, it violates the social contract. And the businesses that do that have broken the contract with society, and don't deserve the protection. So of they don't deserve at least my patronage,
No,
and
well, certainly. And that's
what's known as a boycott,
yeah,
BUY, boycott. I won't
uh-huh,
shop there. So
right. And that is the other side of the freedom of a what we call the misnomer we use of the free market.
right.
We are supposed to be able to choose wherever we want to give our patronage, our custom, and we can base that on any criteria we want.
Mhm.
So, but it doesn't equal out. There's no, like I said, my fear is the problem is that these protected classes are protected because they're minorities. We are trying to ensure the freedoms of this. No, listen, no, hear me out. Hear
Okay,
me out.
okay,
Um, most protected classes are like yes, there is you can't change this,
right.
so you can't discriminate. But the things that can't be changed often, more often than not, are about a minority, a small segment of the population, smaller segment of the population. So,
So yes, I see
so
your point,
we are
and
trying,
it's true for many categories, but not all.
not
And
all,
I'd say
not
the
all.
exceptions are gender. In if you're strictly speaking about discrimination against women who represent actually over half of the population,
Yes.
but were often discriminated against in terms of employment and economics and so on. And I'd say age, when a large segment of the population is over or under a
Well,
certain
then,
age.
okay, so
And
let's
so,
say
but
rather than,
the others, I'd say, yeah, are
well, okay,
smaller segments of the population.
rather than talk, okay, then perhaps I started out incorrectly. And rather than thinking about it in terms of percentages of population, it's empowered versus restricted from power.
Okay,
Okay, so the
sure.
purpose, right? The purpose was to protect the freedom and liberty that every citizen is supposed to be afforded. It is those laws and those anti discrimination laws were put forth and codified to protect the rights of people who have been traditionally previously discriminated against. Okay, that's why they exist,
Sure.
and that is fair, and that is a good use of government. You're protecting the rights of all of your citizens. If it were a simple democracy rule, a class would rise to the top and maintain power and hold it forever and ever. So
Which is undemocratic. So,
which is exactly, you're right,
right.
correctly, exactly correct. So, I'm kind of lost my thread here. The idea that um, these laws exist for a reason. If it were possible for us to say, well, there is no more discrimination, which we can't. There are certain elements on the right who want to say, well, look, we fixed all of this discrimination with these laws now. It's a
as
lie. It's a fallacy.
as someone pointed out in a historical overview of this, 4 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, there were already people saying, well, look, it's been 4 years, isn't that enough? Isn't that enough?
Right.
Haven't we bent over backwards enough to it's been 4 years. um so they have been saying that for a very long time, that it's enough already,
Yeah.
and they're wrong. It's um uh, it's there's a difference between justice and equity and then removing systemic barriers, because there are still systemic barriers to
Yeah.
equal opportunity, and there's no promise of equal results, but there's a, a promise of equal opportunity, and that has not been met. That's
Agreed.
not been fulfilled.
I think we have made significant progress,
Yeah.
but within our lifetimes. Um,
uh,
but it's
yes.
not over. It's not. We're not done.
I have an early memory of driving with my family through West Virginia before I-80 was completed between Western Pennsylvania and New York, because we would
Hmm.
drive to see family. And so before that was completed, you'd have to go down through Pennsylvania and then up through West Virginia and up into New York.
Right.
And I have an early memory of seeing segregated, racially segregated drinking fountains when I
Hmm.
was a kid. They didn't have service plazas in those days. You pulled off the highway and there was a place and you could get gas, a filling station, and there were drinking fountains. And I asked I don't know how old I was, but I could read the sign. So I think I was about 4 or 5, and asked my parents what it was, and they explained it to me, and I was appalled. Um, and I remember talking to my mother many, many years later, and I said, "Hey, I remember this. Do you remember that?" She said, "Oh yeah." She said, "You asked us about it. Do you remember what else happened?" I said, "No." She said, "Oh, well, we explained it to you, and you started in your little child voice, started ranting at the top of your lungs about freedom and justice and equality and and the principles of the ideals. She said, we got you and your sister in the car and got the hell out of there.
I remember clearly driving down Woodward Avenue with my parents, um, and my mother. I don't even remember what the conversation was about, but I do remember my mother using the phrase, pointing to one side of Woodward Avenue as opposed to the other side of Woodward Avenue where we happen to be, is that's where the good black people live.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a thing. And I mean, at the time as a kid, I was probably 6.
Yeah.
It was just confusing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I absolutely remember that. And it's gotten better. We're not done. Like I said, we are long ways from being done. And it's the same with gender identity,
Right.
right? That I think the hope of everybody who supports these kind of equal rights movements is that eventually the goal is for it not to matter anymore.
Right.
Right. That's the goal. Isn't to put these people up on a pedestal. The goal is so that they just become people like everybody else.
Right. Right.
So, and the fear I see in the eyes of every right-wing fanatic dickhead that comes on my screen is the fear that they will be treated the way they've treated other people.
Yeah.
If they don't somehow wrest the momentum away from these segments of the population that are just starting to get a foothold in regular society.
And I think some of those RWFDs, right-wing fanatic dickhead, some of them are true believers. And some of them are using
the true believers.
True believers.
Yeah, sure.
Now, we could get into and it would be a rather lengthy discussion about the fallacious underpinnings of some religious prejudices against various gender identities and expressions.
Yeah.
Because it's I mean, just very briefly, it goes back to misreadings and mistranslations of biblical texts that are often, many of them post event. I mean, hundreds of years later, but even the earlier ones, misreadings, mistranslations. This was not about sex. This was about domination. This was about hospitality. Like Sodom and Gomorrah, the crime was hospitality, a breach of hospitality, not
right,
sexual practice. There's all kinds of stuff, but that's a discussion about theology, and probably in a lot of ways pointless, because as well, somebody was preaching to me once, and I was done listening to it. I said, the things you're saying are based on mistranslations. And they said, they're not mistranslations, they're divinely inspired corrections.
Right.
So we have no basis for discussion because you are completely ignoring the data, the authoritative sources on this.
Are not the original writings divine inspired? Did God change his mind at some point?
But what original writings?
Well, that's the thing.
Because it's not univocal, as one scholar says. The scriptural texts are not. They were not written by one voice, one
No.
person in one hand, not even at the same time, and not even contemporaneous. So there anyway. But
This
that's another issue.
I'd be happy to have this discussion, but it may be beyond the scope of our little podcast here.
Yeah, yeah. It's going to require a lot more of that cask strength bourbon too.
I don't know. I can argue this shit's pretty sober.
So, so I think really to conclude that the the there's this wave of effort to enforce a particular belief system held by a minority.
Yeah, I believe, well,
Held by a
to the
minority.
extent the extent that it's odious the way it is. Yeah,
Yes,
I think that's what I mean.
that perverse minority extreme belief system. There's a concerted effort, and has been for decades, to impose that on all of society. And it is odious, it is reprehensible, and it's anti-American.
I will drink to that.
Yes,
Anti-American.
yes. Well, you're not drinking. You're drinking.
Yeah, I'm drinking
I
to what you're
understand
saying.
what you were saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I not drink to anti. I mean,
Yes.
Americanism is an ideology too.
Yes,
And
but when I was a kid, they stressed good citizenship, but
but see
when
that I
see,
this gets back to the social contract for
it
me.
does, which
Because
is what that was about then. But now that even the use of the flag got perverted to mean something that it's to represent a particular ideology. It bugs the shit out of me when people pervert symbols and take it for their own.
yeah, I mean that's historic. That's
I know.
throughout history. You can't avoid that one way
I
or
know.
another.
It still bothers me.
Well, yeah, and that's why I don't put much stock in symbols of
Right.
things. Um, the thing that it symbolizes, if it's important, is what's important, not the thing.
Yes. That's why the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. Never
No,
did.
it's allegiance to the country. The flag represents that. It's a symbol, but it's not. If you are pledging your allegiance to something, it's to the country and the ideals for which it stands, not to the flag.
Right.
That the flag is a symbol. It's a direction. It's a symbol of the thing, but it's not the thing.
Right.
This is,
It's like the candle in a Zen. It's a focus, right? It's a focus for the act
right.
you're doing, making the pledge. The
This is
fact
not a
that
pipe. You remember the painting? This is not a pipe, and it
no,
says it in French. It's a painting of a pipe, but it says this is not a pipe.
is that Rene Magritte?
Um, it was it Magritte?
It sounds like Magritte, but
I should know that. Hang on a second.
yeah, Professor. I
Um,
can be excused for not knowing it.
yes, it was by Magritte.
Ah,
It was by Magritte.
aha. My
Sorry,
art history, my art history comes back and saves me.
I thought it was, but I'm tired and I've had a glass of wine. It was, and the point of it was, this is not a pipe. This is a painting of a pipe. This is a symbol of a pipe, right? So, but that the flag is not the thing that your allegiance is to.
Right.
if you pledge your allegiance to anything as a citizen, it's to the country.
Well,
And so,
yeah, and like in our SCA thing with our when we so- so-called elevate someone to
right,
the chivalry, one of the accoutrement, one of the part of the regalia of that rank is a gold chain, and it
right,
is supposed to symbolize our fealty,
right,
our loyalty to the crown and its ideals. Right. That
right.
is it is a symbol, and there are we both have worn one that has this lineage that,
Yeah,
I mean, we kind of started it, to be fair, but
yeah,
but the lineage and the chain, the thing itself, because it has gone over the heads of all of these guys, suddenly becomes important in and of itself.
hmm,
And I try to counteract that in my little way, that if I know that the person who's being knighted, I will give them just a chain that costs me very little, and it's just a thing. And I tell them, it's like, look, do not invest too much in the thing. That is not what's important. What's important is the oath you just took, and what you have promised to do. This is just a reminder what you promised to do. The
right,
reminder isn't important. What you promised to do is what's important.
right, exactly.
So yeah, and that's what. And let's the Pledge of Allegiance is another thing. Like as a 8-year-old in elementary school, you were just all required to get up and do it. It meant absolutely nothing.
The E plebnista
Yeah.
of Star Trek, um,
Yeah.
when it was so mangled that they lost the meaning of it. Um,
Well, they knew that it meant loyalty, that it was tribal.
yes.
It was a tribal ritual.
So I actually rewrote the Pledge of Allegiance, um, because it bothered me that it was to the flag, just for what we were saying. So I said, I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the principles for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I like that. Now, I was talking to some people about that. I said, well, I don't think I should be required to pledge allegiance to anything. Yeah, fine, whatever. Go off with your libertarian sovereign citizen self and fuck right off. You don't deserve the protections of society.
Well, I'm not.
I'm not
I
saying allegiance to the country. I'm saying allegiance to your fellow citizens, the principles of the social contract that
Yeah.
the
Okay.
agreement, the ethics of society. Those
Yeah.
are the things that we owe our allegiance to defend. Our promise, as you said, the promise to defend those things. That's the
Well,
promise
and
we take.
I think the to be technical, what your example you just gave is, no, you are not required to swear to do it. You're not,
Right,
and you
right,
shouldn't be required to swear to do it. You're required to do it.
right.
It's more. I don't
Yeah,
care whether you promise to do it. You've got to do it.
right.
So yeah, your Pledge of Allegiance is meaningless, and it doesn't matter. But if you actively reject the things that are in the Pledge of Allegiance, well, you're just a shitty member of society.
Right,
Okay, so
right.
if that's what you're declaring, now we know. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Or a recent appointment to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Uh,
Except
well,
for Ketanji Brown Jackson. I like her. She's good. Justice
well,
Jackson.
she's new.
She is new and she's good. And she has not, to my knowledge, accepted luxury vacations that she gets to on a private jet.
Well, if she ever had, the right would be talking about it in Congress already. So
Right, right. Because hypocrisy.
yeah,
Hypocrisy is another thing that pisses me off. So
we could
I think
do
we've gone around and off on tangents in the way we never do,
hardly
hardly ever.
ever.
But I think we've wrapped up this topic pretty thoroughly.
I think so. We weren't bringing up anything new, except maybe
No,
that the thing about whether it's
Yeah.
against something or in favor of
Yeah,
something
or
makes a
something,
difference.
which I think is significant. So,
Yeah. So congratulations to us for actually coming up with maybe a new thought, but um,
again,
otherwise, please like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Tell your friends
yep.
and
And
be thou
so, a good night.
and true.